Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Very happy to have you all here for our virtual lobby day rally kickoff. As we begin, we have a lot of great stuff coming up. Video, a couple of guest speakers, and some encouraging words for everyone as we get started. So very grateful for everyone to be here today. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Colin Longmore. I'm the Outreach and Education Specialist here at Network Lobby. And we are very, very thrilled for you all to be here for our virtual Lobby Day rally that we have. There's a couple of little words of affirmation, of encouragement, some prep that we're going to be sharing with you all as we kick off into our Lobby Day tomorrow. Sharing with a couple different folks from staff, some guest speakers, and even an elected official that will be sharing some words today. So thank you once again all for being here. And as we start, we actually want to begin with some words from our new executive director, Mary Novak, who's going to share a little bit with us as we begin our rally today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our executive director, Mary Novak.
Thank you, Colin. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are coming in from. We are so grateful for your coming together from all over the country so that we can join our voices to advocate for the Equal Act. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I ask you to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. Let us acknowledge that each of us is currently on the land of different Native American peoples who lived here for many generations and who continue to be systemically erased by policies and practices that remove their histories. Let us also honor the enslaved people who built the wealth and foundation of the institutions that inhabit our lands. Let us recognize the histories of our lands as complicit with the racism of white supremacy. We recognize that these difficult histories persist in present day racial realities throughout our lands. We commit to work together in dismantling racism in all the spaces that we inhabit. Let us now take a moment of silence to acknowledge this land that we each inhabit. Thank you. When Network was founded almost 50 years ago, the sisters from all over the country came into DC from their local ministries for summer workshops on policy, and they lobbied their members of Congress on the pressing issues of the day. Since then, Network has done more in-district lobbying. So this is the first time since the 1970s that Network has been able to gather folks from all over the country to learn about the issues, train to lobby, and then lobby our members of Congress. What a way to enter into Network's 50th year together and to be part of Network's Build a New agenda. This is actually one of the gifts of this virtual space that has been forced upon us by the pandemic. And what a propitious time to gather for the Equal Act as our country lives into its racial reckoning. By now, we are all aware of the systemic racism baked into the criminal legal system and the failed war on drugs. We need to take real concrete steps to begin to dismantle the systemic racism in our criminal legal system. The Equal Act is an important place to start. It is really a no-brainer. It is bipartisan, bicameral, based on good science, easy to understand, and will take the final step after the 2010 Fair Sentencing Act in eliminating the blatant example of racism in the disparity of sentencing in our drug offenses. As you know, being sentenced in today's US criminal legal system is essentially a life sentence if you consider the severe consequences economically, the disruptions in family life, the limited future access to employment, housing, voting, the stigma, the trauma to both the person incarcerated and that person's family. I could go on, but I need not, because we have two dedicated advocates with us this evening, Serena Ligori and Maria Miller, who graciously agreed to join us and share their lived experience with this unjust system. And I know after hearing them, you too will feel the power of their motivation to change the system, and be ready to share that in your meetings with the Hill tomorrow, on the Hill tomorrow. Thank you for gathering today, and blessings on your lobbying efforts tomorrow. Let us pray for our members of Congress that they do the right thing and pass the Equal Act as a step along the way to end the overcriminalization and mass incarceration that result from our racist criminal legal system. It is so good to be with you this afternoon and evening. Thank you for being here. Colin?
Thank you, Mary. Next, as we keep moving, we have actually a little surprise for everyone today. And it's actually a video from one of our elected officials who's gracious enough to record a message for all of us as we prepare for our virtual lobby day tomorrow. That elected official is Congressman Jamie Raskin, who represents the 8th District in Maryland, is a member of the Judiciary Committee, and is also a co-sponsor of the Equal Act. So we're very excited to share with you this message from Congressman Jamie Raskin.
Hi, it's Congressman Jamie Raskin coming to you from Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District. Hello to all my friends at the Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. Delighted to be with you for a minute just to express my strong support for sentencing reform. We know that there are more than 70 million Americans who now have a criminal record, and we have 5% of the world's population in the US, but 25% of the world's prisoners. So we really went overboard and we went off the rails with the federal minimum sentences in all of these drug offenses. And that has obviously had a terribly disproportionate effect on the African-American community and the Hispanic community and the other minority communities in the country. We need to turn it around. We took a first good step with the First Step Act back in 2019, and now we've got the chance with the Equal Act to continue to move things forward and to reverse some of these draconian and really unfair and unequal burdens that are installed in our criminal justice system. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for paying attention to this. It obviously means a whole lot to people who are being held way beyond what justice would require in our prison system. It means a lot to their families, and it also means a lot to our society to be able to save money on ridiculously long-term sentences. So thanks for what you're doing, and hang tough.
Excellent. Next, we're gonna begin to hear from some of our awesome advocates that we have today as guest speakers at our rally today. Our first guest that we have is the Executive Director for New Hour for Women and Children in Long Island, Serena Ligori. New Hour was founded on Long Island to provide meaningful support to current and formerly incarcerated women, their children, and families. They build community to promote successful reentry and lasting reintegration, and to reform unjust criminal justice system policies. They also empower directly impacted people to use their experiences to affect change in the carceral system. And as a fun fact, Serena is also one of our guest speakers during our 2020 virtual Nuns on the Bus tour. So really, this is a welcome back for Serena, and I hope you all will join me in welcoming Serena today.
Thank you so much, Colin, and great to be here with everyone today, this afternoon and this evening, depending on what part of the United States you're in. I was participating this morning in the hanging of a banner in Brentwood, New York, which is the site that our former president, Trump, picked to really target Black and brown communities during his campaigning. And the sign that we held up this morning with folks from the network lobby, from the Sisters of St. Joseph's and New Hour said, "We will not stand for systemic racism in our community." And the Equal Act will do just that. It will take meaningful steps to ensure that Black and brown women and men are not sentenced disproportionately due to their race and due to the substance that they have participated in due to a substance abuse disorder. One of the things that we talk about a lot at New Hour is the fact that the women we work with behind bars in our jails, in our county jails, the women we support coming home from prison and federal prison, all have one thing in common. They have been failed by a carceral system that has not treated them with humanity, dignity, respect, and certainly not with fair sentencing. When I think about my sentence as a 19-year-old, a teenager from a part of the country that is disproportionately segregated, Long Island, New York is known to be one of the most segregated counties, Suffolk and Nassau, across the country. And it is by no small mistake. It is, in fact, intentional that racism has continued to perpetuate disparate sentencing throughout our carceral system. And one of the things that the pandemic has taught me, and I think many of us, is that no longer is it okay to let elected officials stand by and continue to perpetuate racism and classism and socioeconomic disproportionate impact of sentencing on our communities. We have Zoom, we have ways to connect virtually now, and we're so grateful and excited that there will be so many of you calling on our lawmakers to support equity and change. One of the things that we talk about a lot, our New Hour members who are listening now, who have been through the carceral system as I have, is that there's an opportunity to empower those who've been impacted. Mass incarceration has affected all of us. And as a community, we need to think about the fact that we can then change the ways in which the next 10 and 20 and 30 years look for our children and our grandchildren. We can call on our elected officials to end the systemic racism that we've seen in sentencing. And this is one step towards doing that. Mary talked a little bit earlier about the impact of what this kind of legislation could do. And I think especially in places like Long Island where there's segregation, especially throughout our United States, there are so many Americans who will die behind bars without this meaningful step towards sentencing that is fair-minded and thoughtful. I think one of the things that we hear often is that people suffer ongoing trauma from incarceration. And that trauma is exacerbated by sentences that don't match the crime, sentences where certain people will be there less time than others. Myself, as a Latina, a Latinx person, I understand that Black and Brown communities are deeply harmed by the carceral system, and we must do our best to ensure that we call out in the name of everything that we hold true. There is a time for moral reckoning. As Mary said, it's happening across our country, has happened since the George Floyd murder. But the next step now is to look at our carceral system and understand that there is a deep connection between both systemic racism in our community and the mass incarceration we see. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy. And thank you, Colin, for inviting me and the Network Lobby to be here with you tonight.
Speaking with a muted mic. Thank you, Maria, for sharing your words and your insight with us. As we continue on, our next speaker today, we have another powerful advocate they'll be sharing with us, and that is Maria Miller. Maria is a mother, a sister, advocate, and community member. She founded Our Lives Matter in 2015 to address violence in St. Louis after the deaths of her son and brother. Maria is currently working to open a transitional housing facility for women and mothers leaving incarceration. Over the past year, she has been on the front lines of fighting for safe conditions for people incarcerated in St. Louis during the COVID-19 pandemic. Maria is also a returning guest for us, who was also on the 2020 virtual Nuns on the Bus virtual tour. So another warm welcome back for her. And I invite you all to join me in welcoming Maria Miller.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. That was a great introduction. So again, thank you all for having me as I introduce myself and why the Equal Act is important to me. The reason that this is important to me is I had a brother that was murdered inside the Missouri Department of Corrections in 2014. But back in 2002, my brother, as a Black man, was wrongly convicted. It started with the police department and led into the courts. Prosecutorial misconduct and misconduct in the courts. They knowingly found my brother guilty of a crime that they know he did not commit, and he was harshly sent to 52 years in prison. So from the time that my brother was in the courts, he was fighting for his freedom and his justice. He was sent away to prison for 52 years. My brother was brutally murdered inside the Missouri Department of Corrections. We didn't have support. We didn't have publicity. So I began to investigate my brother's death myself. It's a long story to know what that prison, the prosecuting attorney's office, and the courts did to my brother, even in his death. Okay. So I began to investigate my brother's death on my own. Sunshine, I didn't know anything about Sunshine requesting investigation. I just knew that we could not get a lawyer and I had to do something for my brother. So I began to request files. And it was heartbreaking, the things that I read what happened to my brother. So with me and my family riding this time after he was in prison, we got to learn what the Missouri Department of Corrections does to individuals in there because they're not being held accountable. So with that being said, my brother was dehumanized while serving his time in the prison. He was dehumanized in his death, where staff failed him, medically neglected him. As I said, I was outdone when I began to investigate the death with the misconduct and the non-accountability. The investigative team, the prosecuting attorney, as well as the Missouri Attorney General lied to my family. They lied in courts. They gave my family misleading information. They presented false documents to the court. They committed perjury. And to this day, I am still fighting for certain documents from the investigative report that they are refusing to give to me via Sunshine Law. So I recently just filed a Sunshine violation with the help of some state reps, but they're not releasing this information. So when I started this investigation, I knew that I had to do something for justice for Larry Miller. Is a campaign I started. So I began to advocate for those that are incarcerated inside the Missouri Department of Corrections. But I took it back to him being wrongly convicted. So I fight for wrongful convictions as well as humane treatment inside our correctional system. The system is far from justice. It is an unjust system. Accountability to me is a must. As I said, my brother was wrongly convicted, harshly sentenced. Prosecutors knew he was innocent. The prosecutors, even in his murder, knew that they accused him of doing things that they knew that he did not do and presented this in courts. His civil rights and human rights were violated. And like I said, it's heartbreaking that he went into the courts fighting for his life and he died fighting for his life as he was brutally murdered. Staff participated in that murder. They failed to protect him. Medical did not even provide CPR. He died on a cold prison floor. No, he was not gunned down like Mike Brown, with all due respect to the Brown family and the Floyd family. But it wasn't gunned down physically by law officers, but staff participated in his death. No, an officer didn't put their knee on his neck, but he's laid on a cold prison floor, bleeding furiously for hours while staff turned their head, and medical never performed CPR on Larry. My family didn't get the public attention or the legal defense, so many times I often feel like I'm fighting alone. Even to this day, as I said, I'm still fighting the prosecuting attorney, the attorney general. They are still withholding this information on the investigation of my death, where you clearly have files that are saying this is in the investigation, a 3-year-long investigation. I've done my research, and you all can do it as well. There is not one case inside the Missouri Department of Corrections where it took 3 years to investigate any death. So they were hiding things, misplacing things, and covering up a lot of their failure and neglect. They've clearly violated laws, which is the Sunshine Law, by not giving me and my family this information. And accountability is important to me, because if they can lock up a person and place them guilty and put them in jail and hold them accountable, why can't we hold the prosecuting attorneys accountable for perjury? Because when you get in courts and you're lying and giving false information, that's considered perjury. Okay, so this is why this is important. As I began to do my research, I know it's easy to sit here and say the community, we'll say the minority, because it's just not the Blacks, Latinos, Mexicans. And as I began to do my research, looking into the courts, it is the minorities that are wrongly convicted and sentenced to harsh crime because they're poor. They cannot afford proper defense. They have lack of knowledge. I have spent countless and countless hours staying up all night long sometimes investigating and researching to learn the things that I have learned just to try and get justice. So people in my community don't have this access and have these resources. That's why I go back and saw those prisons and I help people. I recently just got someone brought home because staff in there falsely giving them write-ups and violations. I have 2 people that's in St. Louis City who cases have been opened up by Kim Gardner for wrongful conviction. These men have spent over 20 years in prison. So I really feel like it is important for families like me and people that are in those prisons that do not have the proper defense to have laws like the Equal Act to be in play, so that there are rules that hold people in high powers accountable. So it would be a major breakthrough to see bills like this come forward and be acknowledged and supported and come out to help people incarcerated, people like me, so we don't have to fight so hard. So I want to thank you all for what you're doing, because when I started out years ago, I didn't know about platforms like this. I didn't see people like you all out that care. And even as I'm going on, I don't know about your state, but here in Missouri, we don't have a lot of resources that care about the people that are incarcerated or the things that have happened to them or their families.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for sharing your witness and this powerful story that challenges us to continue the fight that we will continue here. As we continue on, we are going to invite on one of our staff community organizers that will help us with a few of our talking points and help us review as we prepare for these lobby visits tomorrow in terms of the Equal Act. And she is one of our grassroots mobilization coordinators, one of our organizers. It's Sister Emily Tukolsky, and I invite her on.
Thanks, Colin. Maria, Serena, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your stories. And to all who are here, thank you for being here today and for your participation in tomorrow's lobby day. I know you've put a lot of heart and thought into this work, and we are so grateful for your commitment to the work of building our society anew. My friends, tomorrow we will virtually enter congressional offices to talk about the need to dismantle systemic racism in our criminal legal system. It's just the next step, with many more to go. We are in this for the long haul. The Equal Act will change so many lives. It is fair, it is retroactive, it is bipartisan and bicameral, and it must pass. We could go on and on about the inhumanity and systemic racism of the US criminal legal system, a system that has horrendous impacts on Black and brown lives, families, and communities, precisely because it was built that way. In a 1994 interview, John Ehrlichman, domestic policy advisor to President Richard Nixon, said, "We knew that we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night in the evening news." Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Of course they did. Ehrlichman's words. In the decades since, more laws built on these manufactured stereotypes and punitive laws, culminating in the passage of the 1994 crime bill. Due to these measures, the US today has the highest percentage of incarcerated people in the world. Sentences of 10, 20, or 30 years. Life imprisonment. Parents taken from their children. Families and communities destabilized. This is far too common. In fact, the Supreme Court, mind-blowingly, has multiple times upheld these kinds of sentences against charges of cruel and unusual punishment. They've said that although they are cruel, they are not unusual, and they are therefore constitutional. What circular logic. Because racial bias in the criminal legal system is usual and commonplace, according to the Supreme Court, it is acceptable. But we've had enough. We've had nearly 5 decades of destructive mass incarceration, and it's time to dismantle the criminal legal system that was built on systemic racism. And so tomorrow, as you enter your virtual meetings, you're taking with you each and every person who has been targeted by the criminal legal system. You're taking with you a vision of the world as it can be, healed and set free. So go out and share this vision of the kingdom of God. Be the change. Because when we come together, we can do amazing things. Peace, my friends, be well, and good night.